All right, it's 12:03 now, so I'll go ahead and get started. Hello, and thank you everyone for joining today's webinar. This is Andrea with the HR Benefits team. We want to thank everyone for taking time out of your day to join us. Today's topic is going to be on the benefits of mindfulness. It is being presented by Alana Negroni with TCTI. We always want to remind employees TCTI is the city's employee assistance program provider. They provide support services to all benefited employees and their eligible dependents. This workshop is going to be recorded and posted on the employee wellness page. So if you want to rewatch it later, or if you know to join today, we will be posting this. If you have any questions throughout the presentation or comments that you want to share, any ideas, feel free to use the chat room feature, or you can also use the raise your hand feature if you have a microphone and you want to ask your questions or give any ideas throughout the presentation. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you, Alana.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I'm going to turn my camera on there so y'all can see something. So yes, thank you so much. Again, my name is Alana Negroni. I am one of the clinicians here at the counseling team. Just a little bit of background on me. So I have been with the counseling team for about 13 years. It'll be 13 years coming up in April of next year, 2021. Mindfulness happens to be one of my, I think, favorite topics. And the reason why is because I think that we as human beings, as individuals, that we, and I'll use some of these examples as we go through the presentation, but I think that we don't realize how much mindlessness we actually practice on a day-to-day basis. We just kind of go through life, and certain moments are on autopilot. And so being able to come in and talk about mindfulness and the impact that that can actually have, not only on our day-to-day lives, not only on our minute-by-minute experiences, but also on just kind of the totality of everything that we're experiencing, whether it's depression, anxiety, ADHD, whatever the case may be. Practicing mindfulness can have a very positive impact on some of those things that a lot of us are struggling with in general, but then also when we lay on some of the extra stressors that we're experiencing in life right now. You've got everything that's going on in the media, you've got COVID-19, you've got all of these things that are just kind of coming in and exacerbating everything that was pre-existing for us. Mindfulness can really kind of jump on board and help us mitigate those impacts a little bit better. So I am going to jump right in here. So in order to first really address this question of what mindfulness is, we first have to talk about what mindfulness is not. So mindfulness is not just thinking positive. Now there is kind of, I think in the world or in the field of psychology right now, there is, or I think maybe even just over social media and Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, there is a term that has kind of caught fire, and it's really this idea of just practice, just being positive, right? We call it toxic positivity. That's the term that's kind of catching fire. That's not what we're talking about. We're not talking about approaching difficult things from this standpoint of we need to be positive. We need to look at the silver lining within the dark cloud. You know, this is something that we're going to be laughing at 5 years from now. We're not talking about that. We're not talking about that positive thinking. We're not talking about that toxic positivity. This is something that's in its own field, its own ballgame. Mindfulness is not just a relaxation technique. So it's not something that you only utilize when you are in the comfort of your home, when you're sitting on your couch, when you're feeling stressed, you're going to practice a little bit of mindfulness. Mindfulness is not that. Mindfulness is not going into a trance, and it is not trying to blank out your mind. Mindfulness, there are some very specific things that we do when we practice mindfulness. And again, that's what this presentation is going to talk about and focus on. But it does help to really talk about what mindfulness is not. Now, in addition to that, in order to highlight mindfulness, we also have to highlight mindlessness. Now, here are some examples. I think number one is probably one that a lot of us can relate to. It's this idea of getting in your car. Maybe you're leaving work, maybe you're leaving the grocery store, but you're getting in your car and you're driving home, and all of a sudden you pull up in front of your house. You have no idea how you got there. You don't remember getting on the freeway. You don't remember getting off the freeway. You know that somehow you did. You know that somehow you made all of the right turns and you were driving safe because you didn't get into a car accident or get pulled over by a police officer. But somehow you went from point A to point B. And everything in between you've kind of lost. That is an example of mindlessness, because what happens during that drive is you're thinking about the stress of work. You're thinking about the stress of family. You're thinking about the exciting birthday party that you get to go to. You're thinking about whatever it is that's future or whatever it is that's past, right? That's mindlessness. It's not being present here in the moment. It's thinking about what's past. It's thinking about what's future. So that's, I think, an example, again, that a lot of us can easily connect with. Number 2, finishing a conversation and not knowing what you actually talked about. I have that occur in my own life a couple of times with my husband, right? We've been talking about something and he's having a great conversation with me, or so he thinks. And all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. What were you just saying? I was listening. I was responding to him. It seemed like I was paying attention, but I was actually thinking about, again, work stress, family stress, something I'm looking forward to, whatever the case may be. So finishing a conversation and not actually knowing what it is that you talked about. Eating in a hurry or on the run. Another example might be reading something and then having to go back and reread it. You know, you actually read the words, but your brain wasn't holding on to that information. Why? Because you weren't focused on the content of the thing it is that you are reading. So those are all examples of the opposite of what we're going to talk about today. Those are all examples of mindlessness. So let's talk a little bit about how mindfulness, how mindlessness is actually measured. So there is a scale. It's called the Mindful Attention Awareness Scale, which is where all of these questions actually come from. It is a scale that helps you kind of figure out how mindful you are, how much you actually practice mindfulness on a consistent day-to-day basis. You can find that scale online. It's easily accessible. It's free. You just Google it, and it will be on the next slide. But you just Google Mindful Attention Awareness Scale, and it will come up with the scale. But here are some of these statements that are on there. So as we go through these, what you would be doing if you were using this as an evaluation for how mindful or how mindless you were, you would be rating yourself on a scale of 1 to 6. 1 being, I almost always do that. 6 being, I almost never do that. And then obviously all of the numbers in between are somewhere in between that. So here's number 1. I could be experiencing some emotion and not be conscious of it until sometime later. So 1, almost always. 6, almost never. Number 2, I break or spill things because of carelessness, not paying attention, or thinking of something else. Number 3, I find it difficult to stay focused on what is happening in the present. Number 4, I tend to walk quickly without paying attention to what I experience along the way. Number 5, I tend to notice feelings of physical tension or discomfort until they really I tend not to notice those feelings until they really grab my attention. That would be an example of, you know, when you're sitting at your computer a lot, or you're really stressed out and all of a sudden you realize, oh my gosh, I have this really bad, you know, knot in the back of my shoulders. Well, that knot has been there for quite some time because it's been building up, but you don't notice until it really grabs your attention and becomes really, really uncomfortable. So again, 1, almost always. 6, almost never. Number 6, I rush through activities without being attentive to them. Number 7, I find myself preoccupied with the future or with the past, what's going to happen or what's already happened. Number 8, I get so focused on the goal I want to achieve that I lose touch with what I am doing right here and right now to get there. And lastly there, number 9, I snack without being aware that I'm actually eating. That's one of the ones I think that I do often. I will find that I'm kind of searching for something. I'm at home, I'm stressed out, I'm here at the office. I go into my little snack drawer, I pull out some chips, I start snacking, and I realize I'm not even really hungry. It was just something to kind of fill my hands. It was something to kind of fill some space in my brain, because what was I doing? I was actually focused on, again, the joyful thing, the stressful thing, the past thing, the future thing. So again, all of this stuff, all of these questions are taken from that mindful attention awareness scale, and you rate them on a scale of 1 to 6. Then what you do at the end of that is you calculate all of the scores that you got. You take an average of all of those scores, a mean, and then you kind of gauge. The higher your number is, the more mindful you are. The lower your number is, the more mindless you are. And the cool thing about this scale is that, again, it does give us a little bit of a gauge. So we know if the things that we're doing are really encouraging this idea of mindfulness, or if that's something that we actually need to improve on, we need to practice it. And again, we'll talk about all of that stuff as we continue to progress through here. So mindfulness is, we've talked about what it's not, we've talked about mindlessness. Now let's really get into the meat and potatoes of what mindfulness is. It is a non-evaluative and sustained moment-to-moment awareness of thoughts, physical sensations, and affective states. So what it really is us just paying attention, right? It's paying attention to what I am actually experiencing right here and right now in this moment. I'll give you an example. So I have a 3-year-old daughter. And the other day she likes to be kind of rocked a little bit before I lay her in her bed to go to sleep. So usually, right, we'll sit there and rock and we'll kind of talk for about 10 minutes and then we put her in her bed and she rolls over and goes to sleep. So I was rocking her. We had read some books. I was rocking her and she started singing this song. And I had all of these things in my mind that I needed to do after I got her to bed. I needed to do the laundry. I needed to get everything prepared for the next day's work day. I needed to get lunches packed. I had all of these things. So as she's singing this song, I'm thinking like, okay, a couple more minutes. I got a couple more minutes to do this, right? And then I realized in that moment that I was actually missing out on a very wonderful experience. So I pulled my phone out. I recorded her sweet little voice singing this song. And I really just kind of paid attention to what I was experiencing in that moment, right? I wasn't worrying about the future stuff. I wasn't worrying about the laundry that needed to be done, the dishes that needed to be done, the lunches that needed to be packed. I'm going to spend this 10 minutes sitting here in this chair with my daughter, regardless of whether I'm paying attention to the moment or if I'm focused on the future. Right. And so when I stopped and I paid attention to the moment, it turned that 10 minutes into a very connective one for the two of us. Like I said, I recorded that, her little memo, her little voice song on my phone. And then wouldn't you know it, about a week later, I was down in Orange County, lovely Orange County traffic. I was teaching a class. I had to come back. The class ended at like 4, which you know what that means. It puts you kind of in the prime of Orange County traffic. So I was already getting a little bit frustrated because I was kind of late getting out of the class. So I'm thinking, oh my gosh, okay, now I'm going to be, sitting in an hour of traffic. So I turned my car on and I realized the gas light is on. So now I have to go to a gas station, which now means that my commute's going to be about 2 hours home because I'm not going to be getting out of here till about 4:30. So I'm sitting there in my car. For whatever reason, my car automatically connected to my phone. And then through my speakers is my little 3-year-old daughter, her song kind of coming through the radio. And so it was able to help kind of calm me in that moment because it connected me to something that was great, lovely, and wonderful. So that really is the power. I tell that story because I want to reiterate that is the power of mindfulness, is that when we stop and we pay attention to what we're experiencing right here and right now, not only does that have an impact on us in that moment and help us re-experience the thing that we're experiencing, but it can also have a huge future impact on our health, on our happiness, on our overall well-being. So again, it's really just staying present in what we're experiencing right here and right now. Mindfulness is also an attribute of consciousness. So for example, a state of being attentive to and aware of what is taking place in the present moment. And I just told you that story to kind of connect that. This is a great saying. Mindfulness is not the answer for all of life's problems. Rather, it's that all of life's problems can be seen more clearly through the lens of a clear mind. Now, there is, for those of you that have kids, or for even those of you that don't, but that have seen the first Frozen movie, there's a song in there, kind of the most famous song, which again, people who don't even have kids or haven't seen the movie probably know. It's called Let It Go. And in that song, what she's talking about is this idea of letting things go, right? But there's a specific phrase in that song, and I can't say it verbatim because I don't remember the lyrics at this point. But basically, she talks about how things seem so much clearer when you just pull yourself back. When I'm not right in it anymore, things seem so much more clear. And that is what mindfulness does. Because what we're not doing is we're not staying too bogged down on the implications that this can have. We're not staying too bogged down on what impact it did have. We're just staying present in the here and now, and we're focusing on what we need to focus on right in this moment. And so a lot of the time, what that does have the ability to do is kind of clear our minds a little bit, clear that lens out so that we can see things a little bit more clear from kind of a whole picture perspective. So here are some mindfulness benefits. Health. Mindfulness does have a huge impact on our physical well-being, on our health. It actually can do things like prevent depression. It can do things like reduce our amount of stress. When we have things like depression that's reduced, stress that's reduced, that will actually have a biological impact on our bodies. I cannot tell you, as a clinician here at the counseling team, how many clients I have had that come in, sit on my couch, and they say, you know, if you had asked me if I'd be sitting here talking to a shrink 5 years ago, I would have looked at you and laughed and said that there's no way that I ever would do that. And here I am 5 years later sitting on your couch. And the only reason why I'm here is because I was experiencing a lot of chest pain. I went to my medical doctor. They ran all kinds of tests and told me it's nothing other than stress. And I need to come in and talk to a mental health professional. So that's the reason why I'm here, because I want you to get rid of my chest pain, basically. So when you look at mindfulness from this dynamic of that it can help reduce stress minute by minute, it can also help prevent depression. Those things are naturally going to have a biological impact on us. So it does do both of that. It also helps with our well-being. Right? When we focus on mindfulness, it does build this resiliency within our minds, within our brains. It builds this resiliency, this ability for us to take crisis in, to take difficult things in, to take stress in, to manage it, because we're focusing again minute by minute on what we need to be doing. So we're managing it. And then once that crisis, once that stress, once that trauma, once that whatever it is managed, again, mindfulness says that once it's managed, we're going to put that behind us. And we're now going to be focusing on whatever it is that we need to be focusing on in this moment. Sometimes that's going to be things like I leave work at work and I come home and I'm able to engage with my family. Sometimes that means that I leave personal struggles, right, outside of the workplace. I don't want to create this dynamic for each of you where you should be able to just completely leave work at work and leave home stuff at home. You're the same person going through that. And so if there's stress at work, that stress is going to come home with you, right? But that's really where mindfulness kicks in, because if there's stress at work, you're able to practice that mindfulness maybe on the commute home. Maybe right now for a lot of us, it might be in the commute from the section of our house that we've deemed as our office over to the living room. Maybe that's going to be our commute. But that mindfulness really does help us kind of build the barrier between those, which can actually relate to and increase our ability to be resilient. Mindfulness actually does also help with our cognitive skills. So our ability to pay attention, our ability to focus, our ability to remember things, what we're doing, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, but what we're doing when we practice mindfulness is that we're actually changing the chemistry within our brain, which then again allows us to be more attentive, to be more focused, and to remember things a little bit better. It greatly helps with interpersonal skills. I can't tell you how many times before I really started practicing mindfulness, how many times I would be in a conversation or an interaction with somebody and I wouldn't quite know what I was feeling until later on. A great example of this, and again, maybe some of you can connect with me on this, but it's when you replay the conversation later on and you think, oh, I wish I would have said that, or I wish I wouldn't have done that, or I wish I would have, right? It's kind of these ifs, because what we're doing is we're replaying that tape, looking at it from the perspective of how we're actually feeling now, right? Or we're looking at it from kind of a whole picture perspective. When we practice mindfulness, that information actually comes to us in the moment. So in the middle of that conversation. So now I might have a conversation with my boss, and if I've practiced mindfulness and I'm really good at kind of cluing in to what's happening for me here, now it's going to tell me that I'm actually feeling kind of agitated. I'm feeling frustrated with the fact that you are asking me to do A, B, and C, and then we can communicate through that. It's telling me that right now that I'm feeling very excited for the opportunity that you're presenting to me, and now I can communicate that piece. It's telling me that right now I feel kind of hurt or kind of sad in this conversation with my significant other, whatever that might be, and I can communicate through that. And so it does definitely help those interpersonal skills, because we are paying attention to what we're actually experiencing, what we actually need, which then allows us, the opportunity, it affords us the opportunity to actually communicate that. Leadership, mindfulness can be a great leadership tool. Again, those interpersonal skills can connect with that a little bit, but decision making, it does also help us gain a little bit of perspective. I think that we all know those people in our lives that make knee-jerk decisions, right? Here's the thing that we're experiencing. Here's the stress that we're experiencing now. We're just going to make a decision based off of that. That's mindlessness. It might seem like mindfulness because we're paying attention to here in the moment, but all we're doing is paying attention to that emotional response, that emotional reaction. When we're mindful, we're able to identify the stress, the frustration, but we're also able to look at that in the bigger context, in the bigger picture. So it does help prevent some of those knee-jerk reactions. It does help us make some of those better decisions because, again, we're taking in information from a lot more areas than if we're mindlessness and we're just focused in on the stress of the thing. And then also it can also help with team development, the awareness of other people's needs. And we've kind of talked about that throughout. But if you are very present in the moment and you're having a difficult conversation with somebody, or maybe it's not even a difficult conversation, but you're having a conversation with someone and you're kind of reading their stress all over their body language or all over their face, but the words that are coming out of their mouth are things like, oh, I'm doing okay, I'm fine, right? Kind of the typical response, but you're reading their body language and you can tell that something is off there. Again, it actually affords us the ability to address that. You know, I know that you're saying that you're okay, but you look sad. Is there something that I can do to help support you? And then we're just kind of identifying that there's a need. And again, we're able to come in and support each other a little bit better. So those are some of the benefits of mindfulness. Now, there actually are two different types of self-focus, which is a component of mindfulness. So the more that we're able to self-focus, the more mindfulness we're actually practicing. So the first type is experiential, which is the direct noticing of really sensations, what we see, what we hear, what we taste, what we smell, what we touch, any visceral sensations that we might be experiencing. When we are able to focus in on those things, again, what that tells us is that it can help interpret some of the things that we might be experiencing a little bit more emotionally, right? So if I'm seeing something that's really difficult to see, it's a traumatic situation, it's going to help me interpret that this is a traumatic situation. If I am doing something that is very aggressive, right, and I'm including the fact that I'm hearing something that's very aggressive, it's going to help me understand maybe I'm scared. And so the more that we're able to clue in, again, to these things that our bodies are actually experiencing, the bigger picture it's going to help us create. So being able to focus in on those things, and I'll give you some examples of that stuff in a minute. So the second mode of self-focus is conceptual. It's being able to label, that's fearful, that's hurtful, that's scary, whatever that might be, that's joyful, that's happy. It's being able to label those things. It's also allowing us the opportunity to elaborate, right? So the more that I'm taking information in, the more I'm able to identify what that information is, and I'm able to actually elaborate on that. And I'll go back to the example of my little daughter when I was holding her and she was singing that song to me. The more that I focused in that moment and how connective that felt for me, I was able actually to elaborate a little bit more on that feeling, because I love that my 3-year-old daughter, she's only 3, she still wants to sit on my lap and she still wants me to hold her. At some point in time, that's not going to happen anymore. And so I really just wanted to be present there in that moment and kind of elaborate on that feeling of joy and connection. Number 3 there, it does actually help with accurate judging. And I don't necessarily mean accurate judging of people, but I might mean accurate judging of situations. That might mean accurate judging of emotional responses and emotional reactions. So it's being able to judge, what am I feeling and why am I feeling that? If I feel scared in this moment, why do I feel scared? If I feel anxious in this moment, what is it that's making me anxious? Because there is always something that's triggering an emotional reaction. We might not be able to readily identify those things because, again, we're not paying attention to all of this stuff. But the more that we pay attention to those things, the more we're able to accurately judge. It helps with goal setting because, again, we're getting out of kind of being bogged down in the fear of the future, the joy of the future, the fear of the past, the joy of the past. We're getting out of those things, coming into present day and saying, with everything kind of taken into account, where is it that I want to be? So we're able to goal set a little bit better. Planning kind of goes right along with that. Comparing, right? We're able, again, you can look at this from an emotional perspective. We're able to compare, okay, today I don't feel safe in this environment. So what is it about today's environment that's making me feel unsafe versus yesterday when I felt safe? Maybe today I feel happy. What is it about today that's making me feel happy? So we're able to just kind of take information in. And again, we've talked a little bit about that remembering aspect. But then also self-reflection, right? I use the example of having a conversation with somebody and coming back later on and thinking to yourself, oh, I wish I had said this. I wish I hadn't said that. I wish I had done this, or I wish I hadn't done that. When we're able to, again, just stay focused in that moment, we're able to self-reflect right then and there. How am I feeling? What do I want to say? What is it that I want to communicate? What don't I want to communicate? Now, mindfulness is really this idea of focus of attention. So it's like a beam of light, right? If you think about a flashlight, and that picture is a kind of a great example. So if you think about a flashlight, or if you look at that picture, you can see that that ray of light has limited capacity. It doesn't have the ability to illuminate an entire room. It doesn't have the ability to illuminate our entire life, but it has limited capacity. But within that limited capacity, right, it can be very directed. It can be more broadened, or it can be more narrowed, right? Light can always be broadened and it can be narrowed, but we have a little bit more of direction. We have that focus of attention. I get to determine what that focus of attention is, and I get to determine how wide and how narrow that is. I can't focus on everything. I can't focus on work, family, finances, the world, right? All of these things all at the same time. I get to pick and choose what right now in this moment I'm going to be focused on. And again, if I go back to that example of my daughter, in that moment, I got to choose that I was going to focus on the moment, that I wasn't going to focus on the stress of what was going to take place in 15 minutes from now, or what the to-do list looked like. I got to choose what I was going to focus on. I couldn't focus on all of it. I couldn't focus on connecting with my daughter, and I couldn't focus on the to-do list at the same time because my focus of attention had limited capacity, but I got to choose what it is that I focused on. So that is kind of the crux of mindfulness. So research has actually found that mindfulness can have a positive impact on our lives, whether that includes work performance, relationships. I mean, there's a long list there, right? Physical, mental well-being, family life, healthy aging, so forth and so on. That mindfulness, practicing mindfulness, can have a healthy impact on those things. And why is that? Well, that's because when we practice mindfulness, it actually is changing the functionality, the structure of our brain and our brain activity. So mindfulness will increase positive mental states. The more that we focus on what we're experiencing here and now, it's going to make us feel better. Because again, what we're not doing is focusing so much on the stress of the past or so much on the fear of the future. We're focusing on the here and now. We're able to communicate in the here and now. We're able to identify the needs here and now. You know, I have so many couples that will come in and we'll start talking about what's bringing them into therapy, and I'll ask them a question like, well, how long have you been experiencing this? And they will say things to me like, well, for 5 years. Hold on a minute. So you felt very disconnected and very disgruntled and very hurt for 5 years, and you're just now coming in to talk about it and identify it? And then I'll hear things like, well, yeah, that's because I didn't really know what I was feeling, or it's because it kind of got to a boiling point, right? And now I'm only thinking that it's 5 years because you asked me that question, and I'm like going back to the timeline. So the more that we're able to focus on what we need, we can communicate that. When those needs are met, it's going to increase, again, our quality of life and that positive mental state. It can also help us self-regulate behavior. I have a client that I am currently working with that has experienced some pretty severe childhood trauma. And she has gotten herself to the point where she knows that when she has an anger reaction with her family in particular, that it's coming from a place of pain. And so she knows that when she gets really angry with her family, that she has to take a step back, because it's not about the situation, right? It's not about the moment that she's dealing with. It's about all the historical stuff coming forward. And in that mindfulness practice, she's able to identify, whoo, this isn't about what's happening right now. This is about what happened to me. And so I'm able to kind of self-regulate that anger, take a step back, take a couple of breathers, and then I can approach the situation from a more mindful perspective. Heightened self-knowledge and heightened self-awareness, we've kind of talked about that throughout. So there are a lot of brain-body benefits. The cortical regions of the brain are related to attention and sensory processing are actually strengthened, because again, when we focus on the here and now, when we tell our brain what we're going to focus on, it's strengthening those connections. It's strengthening our ability to do that. We are, again, literally changing the functioning of our brain. The symptoms of ADHD, lack of focus, sustained attention, and follow through, disorganization are actually reduced because, again, we're teaching our brain to focus on the here and now and not to be focusing in on all of the things that don't have a role in the here and now. Our brain responds to mindfulness by making positive changes in its density and structure. Mindfulness is good for brain plasticity or flexibility. So again, I know I've said it multiple times and you're probably sick of it already, but mindfulness can change the structure of our brain. And when the structure of our brain is changed in a positive way, it's going to have a positive impact on our life, on the way that we interact with things, whether that's the way that we interact with stress, whether that's the way that we interact with people, in situations and scenarios, with trees, with cars, with whatever it is, right? It's gonna impact the way that we interact with everything around us. Mindful meditation actually strengthens our immune system because, again, there's a lot of research that's out there that says that happier people get sick less often. Why is that? Because when you're stressed, right, when you are depressed, your body is biologically being impacted. And so if you're happier, you're healthier. And so mindfulness can contribute to that. Awareness allows the body to recover sooner from stressful situations. This one for me, I think, is a very important one because the more that we practice mindfulness, again, what we're doing is we are naturally reducing that primary stress hormone that we experience when we become stressed. Life is stressful. I don't care how much mindfulness you practice, right? Life is going to be stressful. But the more mindfulness you practice, what you're doing on a much more daily basis is you're reducing those levels of stress so that your body is never really getting acclimated to these higher levels. And so what happens is there's not a lot of buildup of that hormone. And so your body is able to kind of decrease that. It's like, you know, the analogy that we use in the field of psychology a lot is like a cup. If you're walking around with a 3/4 of a cup full, when you put a little bit in, right, it's going to come spilling out. But if on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, whenever I can, I make sure that I'm dumping that cup out. Now more can continually go in because I'm continually dumping that out. And mindfulness can be a great way to kind of have that stress dump. Emotion and mood benefits. The frontal cortex of the brain that picks up on emotional cues is activated and actually becomes sharper, more acute. We've talked about that. Long-term mindfulness practitioners show higher levels of empathetic awareness. So we talked about how mindfulness can impact relationships. And largely that's because, again, people who practice mindfulness on a continual basis are much more in tune emotionally with themselves, but also with other people. And so they do have a tendency to be much more empathetic. A person's affect becomes more positive. We've talked about that. Anxiety and depression can be reduced, and people prone to depression are less likely to relapse and experience depression in the future. Here's another quote: mindfulness improves working memory, which is a key component of cognitive performance. Working memory is critical because under stress, it's what we go to when we do things that are important. Attention to the present moment allows improved focus upon the tasks at hand. All right, so here kind of is, I think, really the cornerstone of this presentation, right? We've talked about mindfulness, mindlessness, what it is, what it isn't. Now let's talk, we've talked about some of the benefits of it, some of the positive things that it can change in each of our lives, but now let's actually talk about how to do it. So you now know the importance of it, but how do you practice it, right? How do you do it? So I'm going to give you an example, and then we're going to kind of go through this exercise. An example that I would encourage each of you to practice on a daily basis would be every time you get in your car, assuming that there's not, 10 other people in there and your kids are asking you questions and your friends are in there and you're having conversations. Let's just say that you're in your car alone. I want you to turn the air conditioner on. I want you to roll down the window. I want you to turn up the music. I want you to create things that are going to give your body a sensation. And then I want you to pay attention to that sensation. I want you to actually feel the air conditioner on your face. I want you to actually listen to the words that are coming through the radio. I want you to pay attention to the sun coming in through the window and how that heats up your skin. I want you to pay attention to the clothes that you're in, the tight shoes that you're wearing, or the flip-flops that you have on your feet. I want you to pay attention to how your body is actually experiencing things. And that would be a super easy example of how to use mindfulness on a thing during an experience that a lot of us have, several times a day. But quickly here, what I want to do with you is I want to spend a couple of minutes taking you through a much more meditative mindfulness exercise Now, I told you in the very beginning that mindfulness in and of itself is not just meditation, but the more that we do this, the more, again, it's like that beam of light. The more that we focus our attention, we have to train ourselves to do that. The more that we do this, the better off we are now in conversations being able to do that. So what I want you to do is I want you to, if you're able to, close your eyes. I'm going to just take a couple of deep breaths in and out. And as you do that, I want you to fill your lungs, filling with air. Feel them fill, feel them release. I want you to continue to slowly take those deep breaths in and out. And I want you to feel how that has an impact on your body. As you do that, I want you to say the words breathing in your mind and breathing out in your mind. You can shorten that to just in and out if that's easier for you. But again, I want you to focus on the body sensations that you're experiencing. I want you to do what we call a body scan, which is starting at the top of your head and working your way down all the way to the tips of your toes. And as you focus on that breathing in and on that breathing out, I want you to see if there's any areas of discomfort. Your shoulders, your chest, stomach, your arms. Notice if there are any areas of discomfort. As you notice one, I want you to label it, identify it as discomfort, as pain, and then I want you to move forward. Continue to move down your body until you've scanned your entire body. Once you've done that, I want you to come back to your breathing. Deep breath in. Feel your lungs fill up with air. Deep breath out. Feel your lungs empty that air. Deep breath in. Deep breath out. Whenever you're ready, go ahead and open your eyes and bring yourself back visually to the moment that we're in. Now, again, what that was an exercise in mindfulness. Now, what I asked you to do in that moment, again, was really to pay attention to some of the sensations that you were experiencing, whether that's discomfort in your body, whether that is the sensation of your lungs filling up with air or releasing that air. So many times our brains are just completely on autopilot. We know that we breathe, right, throughout the day. Obviously, we breathe all day long throughout the day. But have you ever stopped to focus? And some of you may have. But have you ever stopped to focus on what that actually feels like? Another example that I like to use when I'm in person teaching a class is I'll bring a bag of Starburst around and have everybody, pop a Starburst in their mouth. If you're anything like me, the way that you eat Starburst is you unwrap it, pop it in your mouth, chew it up, and in the meantime, you're already unwrapping the next one, right? You've eaten 3/4 of the bag before you realize like what flavors I'm eating. Oh, look, they were all reds or whatever it might be. But when you actually eat a Starburst in a mindful manner, what you do, or anything, this could be any food, you put the Starburst in your mouth, and you actually start to feel your taste buds activate a little bit, right? You start to build some saliva within your mouth. You take a bite into that Starburst and you realize the texture, that it's kind of hard. It's a little bit chewy. It's kind of getting stuck in my teeth. Oh, this one must have been a pink one or a fruity one. Maybe I'm getting a little bit of pineapple, right? You're starting to pay attention to the actual taste in your mouth of the Starburst. And then as you continue to chew through that, you start to notice and recognize that the Starburst is kind of disintegrating into your mouth. And then maybe at some point you swallow the rest of it. Again, I don't know about you, but that's not typically the way that I eat Starburst, right? I just completely woof it down and now I'm on to the next one. But when you eat a Starburst in that way, when you practice these mindfulness exercises, what that does is it gives you a completely different experience with something that you've experienced countless times. It completely reinterprets that moment. Now I want you to take that theory and make it bigger, make it life implicating. When you practice mindfulness on a consistent basis, that starburst experience from just experiencing the starburst in that way goes now to I'm experiencing conversations differently because I have trained my brain to pay attention in the moment to what I'm experiencing. I've trained my brain to pay attention in the moment to how I'm feeling and then consequently how I want to respond. So it starts small and it has a huge buildup. I might practice eating Starburst that way. I might practice that for the first few bites of dinner. I don't want you to think that my expectation is that you're going to eat dinner like that every single night, right? Every bite, you're going to be eating your hamburger, your spaghetti, or whatever it is that you're eating, and you're practicing mindfulness. That's not my expectation. But again, the more that you can practice that, even in some of those smaller moments, you're training your brain. Practice makes perfect. The more that we train our brains to do those things, the more it will automatically do those things. So I do encourage you to practice some of those mindful exercises. Learning through mindfulness practice to approach our experience in new ways. I just talked about that. Moment by moment, non-judgmental awareness of body sensations. That's a very important word that's in there, non-judgmental. When you are paying attention to what you're experiencing, what I don't want you doing is judging whether that's valid or not. I talked earlier about how mindfulness can increase our ability for judgment, like what am I experiencing? Is this safe? Is that whatever the case may be? That's a positive thing. But judging should I or shouldn't I be in that negative manner is not what mindfulness is about. You should just be taking in, okay, the reality is this is how I feel. Now what am I going to do with that feeling? If I don't want to feel that way, then there's something that I can do about that. If I do want to feel this way, then again, there's something that I can do about that. But the fact that I feel that way is not good or bad, it just is. So we don't want to be judgmental of why we're feeling that or of whether we should or we shouldn't be feeling that thing. But we do potentially want to be judgmental of whether I want to continue to feel that or not, if that makes sense. We did the body scan. That's another example of more of a meditation practice that leads to mindfulness. And then again, awareness of present moment experience during daily life. Check in with yourself. You know, that's a great daily moment by moment example of how we can practice mindfulness is set a timer on your phone for, you know, every 3 hours or however often it is that you can remember. And when that timer goes off, you ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? I'm feeling stressed. I'm feeling happy. I'm feeling tired. I'm feeling, you know, fill in the blank. And the more that you do that throughout your day, again, what you're doing is you are telling your brain what to pay attention to. You're not on autopilot. You are telling your brain what to pay attention to. Now, this kind of goes into some of the stuff that's on this slide. There are a lot of us in the world that deal with consistent automatic negative thoughts. And those negative thoughts can come from negative thoughts about others, to negative thoughts about relationships, to negative thoughts about ourselves. And when I have clients that are dealing with those automatic negative thoughts, it becomes really hard for them to change them. And the reason why is because they don't even know how frequently they occur, right? I just am constantly thinking negative things about myself. I don't even realize that it's throughout my entire day. And when you start to practice that mindfulness, start to label it, it's not good or bad, but there's that negative automatic thought again. I'm thinking that I'm less than, or that I'm not worthy of, or there's something wrong with me, or whatever the case may be. Label it, identify it, because the more that you identify it, the more you can choose what to focus on. I'm not going to choose to focus on those negative automatic thoughts right now. I'm going to choose to focus on the fact that I am teaching a class and I'm staring out of the window and there are 2 trees outside of my window and one of them is blooming with these really beautiful pink flowers. And that's what I'm going to choose to focus on right now, here in this moment. And then again, the more that you train your brain to get away from those negative automatic thoughts into things that you want to focus on. Might not be the beautiful trees. It might be that I'm actually teaching a class and that's what I need to focus on right now, right? You can train your brain. The more that you practice that, the more you can train your brain to actually focus on the things that you want to be focused on and not just allowing your brain to do, you know, whatever it is that your brain thinks that it needs to do. You're telling it what it needs to do. Again, these are all things that we have kind of talked about throughout. It increases our awareness, gives us the ability to place our attention, develops a new relationship with our experiences, like I talked about with the starburst. You want to be a being mind rather than a doing mind. I'm experiencing, I'm feeling, I'm a part of that, as opposed to autopilot where I just do that. And that really is it as far as the presentation is concerned. I don't know, there we go. If anybody has any questions, comments, concerns. Or any of that good stuff.
I'm looking. I don't see anything right now in the chat room. I don't know if anyone has their hand up. Let me just double check. No, I don't see anything. But thank you so much, Alana, for this helpful information. I feel like I definitely got a lot from it when you were talking about, the misconception of mindfulness. I do see a lot of things posted about, mindfulness just being that positive thinking and being in that trance state where you're just kind of not dealing with the issues and just trying to look past it. So I'm really glad that you addressed that. And I definitely noticed that I do a lot of the, it wasn't mindfulness. You said it's the mindlessness.
Yeah.
Where like you said, you walk away from a conversation and you're like, what did we just say to each other? Or you drive home and you're like, which way did I even take? Was that light even green? So I feel like this is very, very helpful. I know a lot of us, we have a lot on our mind when it comes to work and COVID, and some of us are teaching our kids at home right now. So there's just a lot going on. So I think this is definitely very helpful in promoting our wellness and just being present in the moment. So thank you so much for all of this info.
Yeah, of course. And you said something too, I think that's equally important, is that feeling of mindfulness is not just paying attention to the good things. Mindfulness is paying attention to the things that we typically don't want to be paying attention to, right? It's the stress, it's the fear, it's the sadness, it's the anger. We need for those emotions to be recognized, identified, because the more that we do that, the more we can communicate through that. And then we're no longer feeling the fear, the pain, the sadness, the anger. And so it's not just focusing on the good and kind of blanking out our mind. It's actually identifying the needs in the midst of good emotions, as well as in the midst of some of those ones that we don't want to feel.
Yes, I'm seeing comments, a lot of thank yous from our team, from our employees here. Somebody did put on here, I feel like this could be a life-changing moment, just realizing how they can change their perspective and ways of dealing with things. So thank you so much again. We will be posting a recording of this presentation on the wellness page. So if anyone wants to rewatch it, or if you know someone that, like I said, couldn't make it today, they can always rewatch it later. If anyone has any questions, feel free in these last final minutes to reach out, or you can also send me an email if you don't want to ask in the group setting. All right. Well, thank you so much again, Alana, for being here with us, taking the time to speak to our employees and sharing some of your own personal experiences. We really appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thank you all for coming and attending and listening in to me.
Yes. So I'll stay on for the next until about 1 o'clock. So if anyone has any questions, feel free to stay on. If not, everybody, I hope you have a wonderful day, great rest of the week, and just stay safe out there.